always looking for more participants. So if you or anybody you know would be interested in joining the topic groups, the working groups, the ad hoc COVID group, the Open Code Initiative, there are lots of links here. And if you don't have this, if the hyperlinks don't work for you, I'll put some of these in the chat so people can follow up. But thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. So I think we're going to pass straight to the next speaker. If there are any questions, I can answer them in the chat. But I think, hi, Monique.
Hi, nice presentation. Does somebody at ITU have my presentation they can share?
Hi, yes, can you tell me again the name of the presentation?
So, yeah, my name is Monique Kuglitsch, and the presentation is called AI for Natural Disaster Management.
Okay, give me 1 second.
I think this is Bastian. I think the name of the file is just ITU, the Emerging Tech PowerPoint text.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the file name would be that. Yes, thanks.
All right, let me know if it's this one. I hope it is.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, you can also say next for me to move on.
Okay,
right.
Can you put it in presentation mode? Is that possible?
I'm looking for, I'm not sure. Usually I have it done out. Maybe it's because I was on the web browser. I don't see any other option.
Okay, well, I think it's legible, so I think that's not a problem if it's in this. Takes a little bit of the element of surprise away. But
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, it's okay. It's no problem.
Oh, maybe now. Yes. Okay, good.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. So my name is Monique Kuglitsch, and I'm the chair of the focus group on AI for Natural Disaster Management, and I'm also the innovation manager at Fraunhofer Heinrich Hertz Institute in Berlin, Germany. I'm really excited to partake in today's event, which is going to be looking at the synergies among our activities, as well as those in the focus group on AI for Health. And as some of you might know, it feels a little bit like coming home because I have quite a history with the focus group on AI for Health. And you'll probably notice some similarities in the ways that our groups are structured based on this history. So one of the first impacts that comes to mind when we think of natural disasters is injury and mortality. And depending on the hazard, it can arise from exposure to elements. So a heat stroke due to a heat wave, respiratory illness due to dust storms, and these types of things. It can also arise from being struck by debris, through a collapse of infrastructure, through contamination of water supplies and spread of waterborne illness, such as cholera, transport of pathogens such as valley fever, which can be transported by dust storms, and also food shortages through droughts, floods, plagues, as well as disruption of supply chains. However, whereas the focus group on AI for Health is looking at the use of AI to support the detection, diagnosis, and medical decision-making for conditions, our focus group is exploring the use of geospatial data and AI to understand natural hazards, to detect events in real time, to forecast events, and also to communicate impending or ongoing events. So it's a little bit of a different perspective, but of course the health does exist in both, of course. So through this, it's hoped that we can improve our preparedness and timely response to hazards, and therefore mitigate some of the health-related as well as other costs. So a little bit later on in the session, we're going to be hearing a presentation from Zap Malaria. This IBM AI prize-winning company combines geospatial data with AI to identify areas at high risk of hosting stagnant water, which can serve as a breeding ground for malaria-transmitting mosquitoes. And you're also going to see another presentation that looks at how AI can be used to detect malaria in blood samples. So it's again going to be this 2 different approaches from the 2 different focus groups, but both addressing biohazard. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So natural disasters are damaging physical events of predominantly natural origins. So in our focus group, we're looking at atmospheric, hydrologic, geophysical, oceanographic, and biologic hazards. And in addition to injury and mortality, they can cause displacements, damage to property, including cultural heritage, infrastructure, and disturbance to nature and natural resources. In fact, between 2005 and 2015, 1.5 billion people were impacted by natural disasters, with 700,000 lives lost, 1.4 million injuries suffered, and 23 million people left homeless. From a financial perspective, global losses due to natural disasters since 1980 amount to $5.2 billion US. Unfortunately, the impacts of natural disasters are exacerbated in certain regions, such as small island developing states and least developed countries. And they're also impact certain populations more than others. So women and children are particularly vulnerable. We also expect these impacts to worsen due to population growth, rapid urban development, and a growing frequency and intensity of some events. Next slide, please. So consequently, natural hazards and disasters feature prominently in the activities of many UN organizations and programs, including the SDGs, and policy guiding publications, such as those from the IPCC. Next slide, please. Through advances in AI-based algorithms, a growth in computational power, and the emergence of large and often publicly available data sets, there's been an increase in the use of data and AI-driven approaches to solve tasks in many scientific fields, such as health. And what we want to know is, through tapping the potential of AI in the field of natural disaster management, can we improve our understanding of natural hazards, our ability to detect events in real time, our ability to forecast events, and our ability to effectively communicate an impending or ongoing disaster? What are the best practices when using AI, and what are the limitations? So as you can see in this figure, which was published in the February issue of EOS, which is the journal that's published by the American Geophysical Union, some priority areas when using AI for this application include creating documentation with standards. So this goes quite nicely with what our focus group is aiming to do, as well as repositories to facilitate sharing and discovery, generating new benchmarks, and developing architectures and frameworks catered to the needs of geospatial data. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, we're exploring the best practices when it comes to data collection, monitoring, and handling to support the training and testing of AI-based algorithms. We're exploring how AI-based algorithms can be used to reconstruct, detect, and forecast events, as well as our expectations of these algorithms when it comes to, for instance, explainability or transferability of the models, as well as the ways that AI can be used to support effective communications. So let's look at these in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. High quality data are the foundation of AI-based algorithms. So some questions that we're exploring are, what requirements should data meet when they're being used to train or test an AI-based algorithm? For instance, what are the best practices when it comes to data collection and storage, data quality and pre-processing, spatiotemporal resolution and extensive data, and the generalizability of data? Can AI-based algorithms be used to enhance data quantity? So using AI-based algorithms, can we detect changes in landscape features in a remotely sensed image and create data sets that reflect those changes? And using methods such as federated learning, can we avoid data export issues? So this is an issue that I think also in the healthcare sector is a concern, and that is, how do we access data if a hospital does not want to let that data be removed from their database? And we have a similar situation when it comes to geospatial data. Some countries do not want to export their data. And so we're looking at how federated learning and other approaches can be used to overcome these challenges. And last of all, can AI-based algorithms be used to enhance data quality? So can they help us to locate inhomogeneities in a data set so that we can improve the overall quality of our data? So just to highlight the importance of data, I have a nice stream gauge and a weather station. Next slide, please. AI-based algorithms can be used to enhance and improve traditional models used to make reconstructions, numerical-based forecasts, and physics or data-driven projections of natural disasters. They can also be used to detect features in real-time data streams and support early warning systems. So some questions that we're exploring are, what is the current gold standard method to reconstruct, detect, or forecast events? And how can AI-based algorithms bring these methods to the next level? How can AI-based algorithms be used to leverage synergies from different data sources more effectively? And how can they help us to identify complex relationships and patterns in data? And finally, what should we consider when we evaluate an AI-based algorithm? And in this graphic, you can see a statistical dynamical hurricane forecast model from the National Hurricane Center in the US compared with a grid-based recurrent neural network. Next slide, please. Wonderful. The Sendai framework advises us to develop, maintain, and strengthen people-centered, multi-hazard, multi-sectoral forecasting and early warning systems, disaster risk and emergency communications mechanisms, social technologies, and hazard monitoring telecommunication systems. So within this context, some questions we're exploring are, once a natural disaster has been detected or forecast, how can AI assist with the immediate response? For instance, through early warning systems, through chatbots, through decision support systems, through automated translation services, or through push messages to cell phones. And how do we ensure that communications methods are reliable and trusted by the population? Are they accompanied by a clear set of protocols to ensure that individuals know how to respond? Next slide, please. So we're going to be exploring these topics and more and producing a set of deliverables. We're going to be having workshops that bring together experts and encourage collaboration and highlight groundbreaking activities in this topic. So we just had a workshop 2 weeks ago, and our next workshop is going to be the 30th of August. So I hope to see you all there. We're going to be making a roadmap of existing or ongoing pre-standardization and standardization activities in this space to encourage collaboration, to identify potential partners, and also to ensure that we do not do duplication of effort. The cornerstone of our work are actually 3 non-normative technical reports that are going to be summarizing the findings of our analyses and that are going to be based on selected use cases. And finally, we're going to be making educational materials to ensure that the content of these technical reports is accessible to all stakeholders and to support capacity building. Next slide, please. So to do this, we're building a community of experts and stakeholders. Now, ITU focus groups are an ideal platform for such an exchange. They support the efforts of an associated ITU study group. For instance, the mandate of the parent study group for the focus group includes telecommunications for disaster relief and early warning, network resilience and recovery. They provide a working environment for pre-standardization or standardization activities in a chosen area, and they can be rapidly established, and they have the freedom to choose working methods, leadership, financing, and the desired outputs, or in other words, the deliverables. Next slide, please. So this focus group is converging the ICT expertise of the ITU with the natural disaster expertise from the WMO and UN environment, and provides a platform for international, multi-stakeholder, and interdisciplinary collaboration on this topic. Next slide, please. So who are we? The focus group has a multi-tiered structure. As I mentioned, a lot of our activities are based on use cases, and the topic groups are clusters of experts who are exploring how AI is being used for related use cases. So we have a topic group on AI for volcanic eruption forecasting, for instance, and that's building a community of experts who are using AI for this exact application, and they're comparing approaches and discussing best practices. The output of these topic groups is provided to our working groups and is a key component of our 3 technical reports. So the first 3 working groups are on data, modeling, and communications, and they're digesting the output of the topic groups, surveying the body of literature, and connecting with experts to look at how AI is being used in the field, what are the best practices, and what challenges exist when using AI. The first one, as I mentioned, is focused on best practices when it comes to data, and we're very fortunate to have Arif Albayrak from NASA headquarters and Alison Craddock from NASA JPL co-chairing this working group. The second working group is looking at modeling, and we have experts from Fraunhofer Heinrich Hertz Institute, Jackie Ma, as well as Andrea Toretti from the JRC of the EC. And our working group on effective communications is being coordinated by Ivanka Pelevin, also from Fraunhofer Heinrich Hertz Institute. For the roadmap, we're fortunate to have David Oeman from UNFCCC taking the lead. Our colleagues at the ITU TSB Secretariat, Maitali Menon and Hiba Tahawi, keep the focus group on track and support the management team. And if you can jump to the next slide, I'll show you who that is. Awesome, thank you. So I'm very fortunate to have a really wonderful management team that shows a diversity of expertise and brings a lot of flavor to what we do. We have Dr. Elena Shaplaki, who's our vice chair from the University of Gießen. She's an expert in climate and atmospheric hazards. We have Professor Jörg Luderbacher, who's the director of science and innovation and the chief scientist at the WMO. We have Dr. Moralitho Murakrudi from the UN Environment. He's the operations manager at the crisis management branch. From the government of India, we have Srinivas Chaganti. From the National Space Research and Development Agency in Nigeria, we have Dr. Rakia Babamaji. And from China Telecom, we have Ms. Yanchan Wang. Next slide, please. So this is the most important slide. That is how you can get involved. So please visit our website. There you will find our onboarding document, which provides guidance on how you can create a free ITU user account, how you can join our mailing list, how you can register for our workshops and meetings. Again, our next workshop is the 30th of August, so mark your calendars. It'll tell you how you can use our remote participation platform, how you can access our collaboration site, that's where our reports are stored, and also it'll tell you how you can submit written contributions. So for instance, if you have a nice use case proposal that you think would fit within our activities, I would encourage you to submit a proposal. I'll be putting in the chat both our website as well as some information about our upcoming event. And otherwise, that's it for me, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of this session.
Stefan, then it's for you if you're ready.
For me, you mean? Bastian, do you mean me? Or...
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We'll share my screen. So I hope you can see the slides.
We can, thanks.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation today. I'm very happy to be here. I will show the work of our focus group, topic group on outbreaks and how to evaluate outbreak prediction, detection, and annotation. And we are two topic group driver, Aus Abud and myself, Stefan Gossi. I want to note that this idea of detection of outbreak is actually quite old and very much being used in productive systems. So we always think or often think of AI as something of the future, but it's been actually decades, well, at least 10 years, it's been widely used. And I think it's very time that we evaluate how well they perform. This will be quite technical slide, but I hope still to convey for a large audience what we are interested in too. And I have maybe to apologize to the non-English speakers. I could not provide soon enough the slides for interpreters to work on them, but I hope most people can follow. So what's the setting? So we are talking about public health, and the basics are the cases that are reported. Typically infectious disease cases, but need not be. So cases, we can take COVID, are reported to a public health institute. And we distinguish between epidemic or outbreak cases and endemic cases. So what we call outbreak, these are cases that are linked one to another in some way. And endemic is the background. And what is important is that this outbreak ID or this link is something that is operational. It's something that interests the public health agent. This is not something that is medical or that can be objectively defined. This will depend on the interest of each country, of its institutions, and so on. So this is why I think this is very important to keep in mind that here we cannot define objectively what is interesting, but we have to learn from the experts in the countries themselves what for them is relevant. So what I want to talk about, what to evaluate, are three tasks in respect to outbreak context. So the prediction is, well, to say in the future, I expect an outbreak. So the cases have not yet been observed. So if I say in Germany, I expect a fourth wave of COVID in the autumn at the latest, I'm making a prediction for a wave, which is a kind of outbreak, right? Detection is when I just now observed cases. So I say, oh, well, as of today, there are many cases. Maybe they are linked, and that could be a cluster in a slaughterhouse, maybe somewhere. I say, well, maybe we should act and act right now. And annotation is looking back in the past and say, well, I try to reconstruct what happened, and that can be an outbreak investigation, for instance, or reconstruction from transmission chains, for instance. Right, so, and these are these tasks which we try to evaluate, or we wish to evaluate. And here, our idea in one picture. So it's a bit abstract, but I will try to make it clear. So here I present two dimensions for the data. So we can imagine one dimension for space and one dimension for time. So these two dimensions build a grid, and that grid may contain cases. And these cases are labeled. So here I have a case, for instance, of outbreak 2. So this is an outbreak, and I called it outbreak 2. And I can have here 3 types of outbreak, from 1 to 3. Then I have some cases with a cross, which are these endemic cases, so the background cases. And I've added in all of the cells these void cases, which are dummy, to indicate that actually there are no cases there that have been reported. So in that sense, I have a data grid, which is filled with different numbers of cases with different labels on them. And on top of that, I'm showing in the colors 3 so-called signals. So the signals are the output of these tasks. So the algorithm will tell me, okay, here I believe there is an outbreak, and it will tell me that with a certain confidence. So this is what the colors are showing. So now to formalize a little bit how we want to evaluate the process, we'll have some inputs. And we say we have a data cell, which I call X, which are the coordinates of the data that I want to use to evaluate the algorithm. So maybe I have weekly data on the county level. So this will define my grid for the data. Then I have labels for the data. So these are classes for individual cases, as defined by the public health agents, right? So these are experts that tell me, here I know that these cases are linked. And then I have these signals, which are labels also on cells, but this is the algorithm that tells me, okay, here I believe there is something interesting. And now I want to evaluate whether these signals make sense. And what I will show you very briefly is,
this is Bastian.
Yes.
Do you mind wrapping up in 2 minutes? We're running very late.
Okay, I will try to wrap it. So I will skip a few slides, but so the idea would be to associate probability on the data, on the labeled data, and to compute a probability derived from the algorithm on the same data, and to compare the two. So I will skip how I want to do it. I will just say from our approach, you can compute standard scores for data science or machine learning. And you can also consider epidemiological aspects. What is important for epidemiology? Not just the standards, but I can say maybe it's important that I detect big outbreaks, or it's important that I detect in a timely fashion, so early. And that we can also do. And we have tried this on the toy examples. I won't go through the slides, but trying with simple examples, we find that our framework work as we intended. So to wrap up, we have now the first very work in progress, but this seems to work. And now we want to take that further, including fairness and ethics, and then propose simulations, propose a software to be easy to use, and then apply that on real world data. Thank you very much for your attention. You can see here the link to the focus group, and you can contact us by email or follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. So then, Rose, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Bastian. My name is Rose Nakasi. I'm from the Makere AI Lab in Uganda and a member of the focus group AI for Health. Under there, I'm a topic driver for topic group malaria. So could you please reflect my presentation? Is it available?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm getting into 1 second.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Rose Nakasi, and I'll be giving a brief talk on AI-based detection of malaria under the topic group malaria. Malaria is a disease that is spread by a parasite, Plasmodium. It's spread through a mosquito bite to humans. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the global burden of malaria is that malaria accounts for over 229 million cases globally, but mostly the disease affects the sub-Saharan Africa, and that's why we see most of the cases, and it's common in children under the age of 5 years. Next slide, please. So in many developing countries, malaria has been reported as one of the leading causes of death. We see so many patients waiting in very huge numbers, waiting for a diagnosis to be carried out. So because we look at the gold standard, which is the use of microscopy, we have very few microscopists, especially in the developing countries, to be able to carry out the gold standard diagnosis of malaria. Next slide, please. So due to the lack of enough trained lab technicians, we see that most of the patients go undiagnosed, and some of those that are diagnosed get their results when the disease has advanced in very late stages. And yet in Ghana, there was a statistic where we have 1.72 microscopes per 100 population, but then there were only 0.85 trained laboratory technicians for that 100 population. So that equates to the reality that we have many microscopes in most of the public health facilities vis-a-vis the number of trained, skilled personnel to carry out the gold standard diagnosis of malaria. Next slide, please. So the procedure also is limited by the fact that a lab technician is not supposed to view more than 30 to 40 slides a day. So that limits the gold standard method of microscopy. Next slide, please. So what is our solution here? Our solution is to use digital imaging and leverage it with artificial intelligence to be able to help with the automated diagnosis of malaria. So our artifact is in using readily available imaging technologies like smartphones in the developing countries like smartphones. And then we also use the available microscopes in the public health facilities to be able to improve on the diagnosis of malaria. So on the smartphone, we see an image being captured. It goes through the usual procedure of the microscopy. So once this image is captured on the smartphone, we can then be able to use artificial intelligence to be able to map out the pathogens in the blood samples. So here is an example of a thick blood smear image, which was captured using a smartphone. Next slide, please. So we collect as many images as possible for a machine learning algorithm, and using the artificial intelligence models we develop, we are able to detect malaria. And those, with some of the models that we developed, you could clearly see that bounding boxes of red are the detections from the model.
Rose, just if you could please wrap up in the next minute or 90 seconds, that would be great.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in detecting malaria, we look at activities like standardizing AI-based detection models for malaria. We are looking at collecting quality data sets, and some of the solutions to this end is to create AI models that are related to malaria detection, suggestions on scoring and evaluation, and improving benchmarking practice frameworks. We've developed an initial framework which we've tested, but we're into the process of improving it. We want to support, we're looking for people who can support the group in so many different ways, through participation, through engaging in collaboration, through providing quality data sets to that topic group, so that we could see better solutions for AI-based detection of malaria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rose, for your presentation, and apologies for the timing. And as we move on to the next presentation, I would also like to thank the interpreters for their work, and we will do the last presentation without the interpretation. Thank you.
Hey everyone, can you guys see my slides and hear me?
We can see your slides and we can hear you and see you.
Okay, great. So I'm Arbel from Zap Malaria, and we basically belong to a company that's called Sci Diagnostics, and they developed a device that detects, that does blood tests through machine vision. And actually, very much like Ms. Nakasi said, it's also able to look at the blood, a drop of blood, and visualize any malaria parasites. And through the development of this test, we also, Zap is the subsidiary of the company that developed this device. We realized that, there's ways to use machine vision and AI also prevent it. And that's how Zap came about. And the idea of Zap is basically to use technology in order to enable something called larviciding. Now, as you guys may know, malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes. So if we're able to target the mosquitoes that transmit the disease, we're also able to reduce the disease prevalence and possibly even eliminate it. And larviciding, the act of finding these water bodies where the larvae breed and treating them and basically eliminating the mosquitoes, has historically been very important in malaria elimination. And it's been a key method in many successful malaria elimination campaigns. The problem is that when it was attempted in sub-Saharan Africa, where a lot of malaria occurs today, there have been various challenges that led people to kind of not use it as much. There were a lot of water bodies. It was difficult to manage the operations. So we thought, what if we could use AI to power this intervention and bring this intervention back, make it possible for use again, for the purposes of elimination. So basically, the company started as a mobile app that basically helps you manage the intervention. So people walk around with our mobile app, they report water bodies, they're geolocated and centralized through an online dashboard. And basically that enables us to, first of all, make sure that the entire area is covered so that no water body is missed. And also it makes us able to track the treatment of these water bodies, because you do have to go back to water bodies and apply a larvicide that kills the mosquito larvae. And so that's the first thing that we developed. And we realized that we have a lot of data about the exact location of water bodies, the exact location of where malaria occurs. And AI is a perfect tool to use this data to come up with actionable information or data or strategies in order to improve your operations. And that's basically where we took it. So we had we have information about where these water bodies are. Through the analysis of satellite images and topographical data, we're able to, using the data that we collected, predict where water bodies are more likely to occur, given a map of the intervention area where we want to focus. So we're not actually locating the water bodies themselves. We're using the analysis, which is not able to, of satellite images that are not able to visualize the water bodies themselves, to tell us where we're more likely to find water bodies. In addition, we also use machine vision to tell us where the houses are, where people are living. And through combining this data, water bodies are required for mosquitoes to breed, and houses are required for people to live and be the reservoir for malaria. Through a combination of this data, we're able to identify the hotspots for malaria transmission and be able to design interventions that better suit each individual environment. In addition to that, we've developed a simulator that is able to take parameters from research, and given the locations of these water bodies, given the locations of these houses, it enables us to evaluate how each intervention is going to fare in different areas, so that basically we can go to one place and say, here we would recommend larviciding all over the village, or here we recommend larviciding will not be a very good idea because there's too many water bodies. It would cost too much. And so we use this technology for several things. We can use it for improved monitoring of larviciding, and we've shown that in an operation in collaboration with the Agamal Malaria Control Company in Ghana, where we demonstrated that with our, just our mobile app and our dashboard, you're able to monitor larviciding better and reach much better coverage. We also conducted an urban larviciding trial in Ghana as well this year, where we showed that even in a short period of time, through high coverage larviciding enabled by the system, you're able to reduce mosquito populations dramatically within a short period of time and at a much lower cost compared to other interventions that are being tested. And we're also trying to see if this technology can be used for elimination. And actually, a project that we're starting right now in Sao Tome and Principe, which is an island country off the coast of Gabon, we're going to try to use the system on a large scale to see if we can basically use the data that we get and the AI to conduct malaria elimination within a short defined period of time, which is quite an ambitious goal.
If you could wrap up in the next 30 seconds.
Yes, and that's me. If you guys want to ask any questions, you can visit our website, zapmalaria.com, and drop us a line, because I didn't maybe have time to discuss everything. So we would love to get your questions through there, or whatever other ways you want to contact us. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Arvo, and apologies to the organizers of the next session. And that was the end of our session. And thank you to all the participants and speakers.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished panelists and participants.
Recording stopped.
Thank you for the recording. Good day to
Recording in progress.
understand that progress. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me from China?
Yes, we can hear you. So
good.
Yeah, so sorry for the last minute miscoordination regarding the link. So my name is Chong-Mi Kim. I will serve as an MC for you today's discussions. Without further ado, I now have my great pleasure of introducing Ms. Maria Francesca Spatolisano, Assistant Secretary General, Office in Charge and Office of SG Symbol and Technology, for opening remark for our session on opportunities of satellite connectivity. Thank you. Over to you, ASG.
Thank you, Jung-hee, and dear colleagues and all participants, good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you today to this meeting on the opportunities on satellite connectivity, organized by our office, the Office of UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, in partnership with the UN Office on Outer Space Affairs and ITU, during the event on emerging technology for connectivity, especially for LDCs, LLDCs, and SEEDs. Following the COVID-19 pandemic, we are now in a critical moment in history with regards to the development of connectivity ecosystem. Now more than ever, we are seeing how being connected and online has profound impact on one's ability to realize the opportunities of the digital economy, online work, and remote education. But COVID has also made clear the extent of the digital gaps that exist. As we are all painfully aware, almost half of the world population, that is 3.7 billion people, are still not connected to the internet. Some have estimated that COVID has accelerated the digitalization of our society by as much as 8 years. And this has profound implications for how the whole world will function, operate, interact. This means also if we do not take urgent action to address this most fundamental problem of digital divides, the lack of basic connectivity, we risk, as the Secretary General has warned, turning a digital divide into a digital Grand Canyon. We must urgently address those fundamental challenges that remain in bringing meaningful and affordable online access to all, especially in areas with sparsely populated remote communities, often dispersed across distances. This becomes more self-evident if you know that globally about 72% of households in urban areas have access to the internet at home, while almost twice as much does so in rural areas. In particular, the situation of the least developed countries with regards to connectivity is dire, where less than 1 in 5 people are online. In fact, least developed countries, small island developing states, and landlocked developing states face particular challenges in terms of connecting their population. Be it because conventional solutions like building more mobile towers is not as effective where population are scattered across many islands, or it is too expensive to lay cables across long distance to reach very dispersed population. These factors explain in good part why the connectivity gap is particularly pronounced in LDCs, where 17% of the rural population live in areas with no mobile coverage at all, and 19% of rural population is covered, but by only a 2G network. All this means that we have already fallen short of the Sustainable Development Goal and its target 9C, aimed at providing universal and affordable access to the internet in the least developed countries by 2020. We are in 2021. So looking ahead to the LDC 5 conference, and as we are now striving to build back better from COVID, we must urgently resolve to take action to connect the unconnected, particularly for those most in danger of being left behind. Indeed, global connectivity is the foundation of the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation and his vision for a more open, free, and secure digital future for all. Working with our multi-stakeholder partners, including ITU and UNOSA, the Office of the Envoy on Technology is thus putting priority on these issues and driving this agenda forward with the urgency required. With this intent in mind, we are deeply committed to examining all opportunities and possibilities to bridge connectivity gaps. To some extent, the international community's analysis and recommendations have been focused on mobile broadband in terms of the cost and affordability of connectivity. But we must also look at emerging technologies that could drive the future. While mobile and broadband will remain important, of course, we should also consider infrastructure investments that move beyond simply building mobile towers and consider fiber cables, satellite and wireless deployments. We need to better leverage technologies such as low Earth orbiting satellites, TV white space, wireless Wi-Fi and fiber. This is why today's event, to explore the possibility of space-based technology for connectivity, is particularly important and very timely. The recent race to build satellite constellations that deliver low-cost, high-speed internet has been fueling a dramatic growth in the global space economy. The COVID-19 pandemic has amplified the many ways of using satellite technologies to deploy connectivities on demand to various underserved sites, such as remote hospitals. Achieving universal connectivity and the Secretary General's call to ensure that all have universal and affordable access to the internet by 2030 will require using all possible means and technologies, as well as collaborating with all relevant industries. With our eminent panel of experts and practitioners, today's meeting is an opportunity for us all to better understand how satellite technologies can enhance global connectivity and the challenges or barriers for creating an environment that stimulates public-private investment in expanding satellite connectivity. We are particularly interested in how space-based technology can be deployed in underserved areas, especially, as I said, the NDCs and small island developing states. I'm glad for the strong multi-stakeholder engagement shown today, and I hope that this can be the start of broader efforts to achieve more and fully seize the potential of space-based technologies to drive connectivity. Please count on the Office of the Envoy on Technology to continue working closely with all of you. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary General Spatolisano, for this insightful remark. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Simonetta Di Pippo, Director of UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. She will join us via her video message. Technicians, would you please play her video, please? Luisa? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
A video, please.
Can you see it on the screen, or you can't see anything at all?
Yes, it's on the screen, Luisa.
Thank you.
I warmly welcome you all to this gathering. Space technologies are one of the key tools powering our path towards sustainable socio-economic development.
Please, no sound.
over 40% of the population is not online.
The sound keeps going in and out. Is there any possibility of trying to restart it with the sound continuously?
It's absolutely no audio.
Distinguished panelists, dear participants, it is a great honor to work with the Tech Envoy Office on this event on satellite connectivity. I warmly welcome you all to this gathering. Space technologies are one of the key tools powering our path towards sustainable socio-economic development. We estimate that over 50% of the 169 targets underpinning all 17 Sustainable Development Goals greatly benefit from space assets, some through a unique contribution. Satellite communication plays an instrumental part in this regard. By reducing the need to deploy infrastructure and offering more cost-effective service delivery options, space-based technology both complements and, in many instances, substitutes Earth-based alternatives. Thanks to the combination of the two, global connectivity has never been higher. However, both digital and space divide remain prevalent. Over 40% of the population is not online, and more than 100 UN member states have never had a satellite in space, and many who did have not yet succeeded in building sustainable space economies. As these two divides are delicately interlinked, missing out on the aspects of one impacts the other and vice versa. The COVID-19 pandemic is a vivid example of the vulnerabilities these gaps create. The path is clear. We must work together to bridge both the digital divide and the space divide. The space community strives to hit both nails on the head. While past efforts have not succeeded in creating a demand-driven, now large constellations of small satellites in low Earth orbit aspire to become the ultimate solution. Taking advantage of the developments in the launcher and satellite manufacturing sectors, there is an aspiration to tap into unserved and underserved areas, creating affordable global internet access and global near real-time monitoring of the Earth. Many constellation projects are under development worldwide, raising prospects for success as plurality of efforts leads to innovation and better services. At the same time, however, competition translates into an ever greater number of satellites being launched. Currently, there are about 4,000 active satellites, but satellite filings indicate that figure could grow in 10 to 10 years. In principle, this would be great news. However, such developments are greatly impacting efforts to maintain space safe, secure, and sustainable. Without taking steps to heighten the level of commitment to behave responsibly, we will soon run into a problem. The growing density of the orbital environment is already of major concern. Research shows that it adds to the existing sustainability challenges and could lead to increased collision risks down the road. Without an immediate and substantive response to these new realities, the space industry and indeed the modern society could face serious problems. We are becoming increasingly reliant on space assets, and losing the benefits they offer, even for a limited time, could be disastrous for the global economy. Large constellations also pose problems for ground-based astronomical observations. In the absence of significant mitigation efforts, astronomical surveys will be severely affected. Empirical validation has already confirmed that these concerns are not purely theoretical, and we are only at the beginning of this new era in space operations. Well, these issues are recognized and deliberated on at the top political level. Member states and observers of the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space are seeking solutions to these challenges. And the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs is carefully following all developments in the sector as we strive to ensure that all space stakeholders uphold the highest standards of responsibility and transparency in the unique environment that is the province of all humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no exaggeration to say that we are approaching the golden age for space exploration and use. New missions, exciting concepts, lowering barriers to accessing space, all are promising great progress for the industry and for humanity as such. But in everything we do, we must put sustainability at the forefront. Maintaining orbital density with reasonable limits requires action on behalf of stakeholders. In an environment that belongs to all of us and where an action of one actor clearly influences everyone else, there is no place for unilateralism. We must work together so that success today does not impede progress tomorrow. And if we do so, I'm convinced it will translate into a better future for humanity. That is ultimately what we all aim for. I wish you a successful and productive event, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much to the director for this encouraging message and an insightful remark. Ladies and gentlemen, my sincere apology as co-organizer of the event for these technical glitches. We understand that this platform, Zoom platform, has been served as a single platform for all the meeting of the emerging technologies for connectivity. So maybe it's a time to, maybe the platform also understand that today is Friday. Thank you so much for your understanding and patience. Now, it is time to start our real discussions. And then before starting our panel discussion, I would like to welcome and distinguish the speaker, Mr. Dimitri Bush from the Euro Consultant for his keynote presentations. Mr. Dimitri Bush, please. And
yes, thank you.
Have a presentation to share.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you see it.
Yes, we can see it, but maybe make it larger as a screen presentation mode.
Sure, I'll do that. Okay. Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
So, all right. So thank you for the introduction. So I am Dimitri Bush, so senior consultant at Euroconsult, and I'm very happy to be here today to present you a market overview on SATCOM for universal broadband access. So before I start with the market overview, I would like to take a few moments to present Euroconsult so briefly. So the Euroconsult Group is a leading global strategy consulting and market intelligence firm specialized in the space sector and satellite-enabled verticals. As you can see here, we have 8 global locations with our headquarters in Paris, France. And so we accompany private companies and governments around the world in strategic decision-making, providing end-to-end consulting services from strategy definition to implementation. We have over 30 years of experience in consulting, developing comprehensive market intelligence programs, organizing executive level annual summits and training programs as well in the satellite industry. And I would like to highlight on the market intelligence side of business that we released the first edition of our report on the universal broadband access market earlier this year, a topic that will be at the center of my presentation today. So to begin with the presentation, I would say before looking at some of the key trends and numbers, I think it's important to give a bit of a background on what universal broadband access is and why it is so important today for satellites. So access to broadband services is increasingly recognized as a driver of economic growth. For example, public services such as remote health or telelearning are improved with the availability of communication networks. And so due to the benefits associated with broadband services, international organizations are encouraging infrastructure development plans and government promotion of broadband use in remote and as well unserved areas. I would say significant progress has been made globally in recent years in expanding access to and as well adoption of broadband services, as highlighted by the strong growth in total individuals using the internet, which I think has close to double in the 2010s. But I would say despite this positive trend, digital inequities still exist and have in some cases even been accentuated since the start of COVID-19, so a bit less than 1.5 years ago, as many people around the world have been forced to shift towards, let's say, work from home and remote learning due to stay-at-home orders imposed by governments. So I think it's important to look at both the addressable market for satellite and the satellite market itself to better understand the current situation. So you can see here with the chart on the left our reasoning and the overall addressable market for satellite. So of the close to 7.8 billion world population today, 46% remains unconnected, which is still a lot, with most of this population concentrated in developing regions. Overall, the higher the level of human development of a country, and the greater the access to internet. So the dichotomy between advanced and emerging markets is significant. I can give you an example. As for example, just over 10% of people in advanced markets are unconnected, while this number is significantly higher at more than 55% in emerging markets that remain unconnected. There is also a strong dichotomy between urban and rural areas. The low return on investment in network deployment in sparsely populated areas implies that in many emerging countries, connectivity is largely limited to urban areas, and this often leaves, unfortunately, rural areas totally cut off. In these geographic areas, satellite is the primary technology for filling the gap, as it provides an alternative solution where extending terrestrial networks would be uneconomical and not feasible in many cases. Looking at the second layer, so the population addressable by satellite, so around 700 million today. So this, just to explain, includes the population that could be addressed by satellite and the underconnected population, meaning people that are connected to a broadband service but have insufficient data rates or are accessing a service that is too expensive. And so, as mentioned before, so we estimate this market at around 700 million people today, but it is expected to grow by the end of the 2020s. So reasons for that include new satellite technology and next generation satellites. For example, very high throughput satellites, so VHTS satellites, like Viasat-3, for example, and NGSO constellations. So NGSO meaning non-geostationary satellite constellations. And for example, a good example is SpaceX's Starlink. So these will lead to improved economics enabled by lower capacity pricing that are expected to drive higher data rate requirements in coming years. In addition, those constellations are expected to unlock new growth opportunities for latency sensitive applications, such as, for example, cellular backhaul. And this will make satellite solutions more attractive and competitive compared to terrestrial solutions in coming years. Overall, I would say that the negative impact of growing terrestrial deployment should be counterbalanced by improved services that should lead satellite services to increasingly target first underconnected areas, but as well, so rural areas as well. And so if you look at the bottom of the chart, so the 43 million, so this is the total number of satellite broadband users today. So if you calculate the total, this represents a very small share, so around 6% of the total population addressable by satellite. So it's still very low, this percentage. But the good news is that we expect the total number of users to be multiplied by 3 by the end of the 2020s. So I would say that overall, these numbers show that there is still a lot of work to do to be in a position to bridge the digital divide. But overall, I believe that satellite has a central role to play in the post-COVID world in coming years, as many geographic areas around the world remain unconnected or underconnected and will remain so in coming years. And in most cases, we will have limited or no access to terrestrial services. So moving to the next slide, maybe a quick introduction on SATCOM solutions today for the universal broadband access market. So important to highlight is the fact that there are currently 3 solutions used to address this market. So community Wi-Fi hotspots, consumer broadband, and cellular backhaul. So with 3G, 4G, and 5G. What's important to note today is that consumer broadband is the dominant satellite option in advanced economies, while Wi-Fi hotspots are the most used option in emerging markets. And this is mainly due to the lower cost of services and the ability to share costs among, let's say, a larger number of users. And as well, I would say that both SATCOM revenues and capacity usage are expected to observe strong growth in coming years. So moving to the next slide. So here in the next few slides, I will highlight what has changed recently in the SATCOM, in terms of SATCOM technology and economics, and that will make universal broadband services more susceptible to develop strongly in coming years. So first, I think it's interesting to focus on the new space industry. So the space industry has changed a lot in recent years with the development of this new space industry. So you can see here on this slide the differences between traditional and new space, such as, for example, the cost model with new space having more of a, let's say, a low cost model or approach. New space is also software driven, application oriented as well, and the industry overall is much less risk averse than traditional space. Drivers and enablers for new space include new technologies in upstream and downstream. So I can give examples like AI, for example, or cloud computing, quantum computing. And as well, what's important to note is that increasing private investments, so for example, seed funding or venture capital, crowdfunding, as well as new and increasing trends in demand, like connectivity, intelligence, mobility, all of this is important for this industry. And so when looking in further details at private funding, I think that a very important event for new space was the launch of SpaceX's first commercial payload. So I think it was in 2009. And this really marked a turning point in the new space age. So moving to the next slide. So here I'm going to get a focus on the second market, so which is currently facing structural drivers of market pull and technology push. So in recent years, the space sector has been pushing for a substantially more cost-effective satellite and as well ground infrastructure. So these technology investments are geared to meet rapidly evolving market requirements within an increasingly competitive environment. Satellite operators have started to embrace the driving requirements for broadband connectivity. However, what's happening is that they're meeting higher expectations in terms of user experience and as well cost. So in order to better serve these user requirements, satellite operators are adopting new business models, including, for example, co-investment or revenue share. What else? For example, managed services as well. And I would say that the data market is really what's driving the market. So it's providing the satellite industry with significant growth opportunities due to the growing requirements for broadband connectivity, I would say anywhere, anytime. And this is opening new markets for the industry and pushing operators to reposition their investments towards new growth segments. And so universal broadband being one of the key ones today. In recent years as well, the space sector has been pushing for substantially more effective satellite infrastructure and ground segment at a lower cost. So HTS, which is high throughput satellites, systems have been introduced significantly have introduced more satellite capacity in recent years, and as well at a reduced cost per bit. And this trend is expected to intensify, I would say, in coming years and over the next decade, with the growing availability of HTS supply, coupled as well with an increasing push for standardization in satellite manufacturing. So here you can have a look at HTS and the history, recent history of what has happened. So I mentioned earlier HTS as one of the key drivers for SATCOM in recent years. So you can see here, since the introduction of the first HTS satellites that I refer here as GEO HTS 1.0, which is for first generation of satellites. So a lot has happened since then, right? It was in the mid-2000s. And so since then, several new generations of HTS satellites have been launched or are planned to be launched in coming years, leading to a multi-layered environment. So as you can see here, with each new generation of satellites is associated an increase in capacity provided per satellite. So we started at less than 10 Gbps per satellite with the first generation, and we're today at hundreds of Gbps for the latest generation of satellites. And when you look at NGSO constellations, they will even provide capacity in the TBPS, at the TBPS level. So apart from bringing more capacity, I think these new generations of HTS satellites are also bringing more flexibility to the table. And with some new generation satellites offering even full flexibility, when the first generation of HTS satellite offered basically no flexibility. And what has this led to? So if we focus on the cost base of capacity, which is actually the total space segment, CapEx, so capital expenditure, divided by GBPS. So it has fallen significantly over the past 20 years since the introduction of the first HTS satellites. So it's due in part to these new HTS satellites, and this is essential for the broadband market to develop further. We need prices to decrease even further, and that's how you can really develop this satellite broadband market in coming years. And as you can see here, the cost base of capacity has been divided by 10 between the first generation of satellites and the latest generation. Manufacturers of satellites have generally been able to offer higher volumes of capacity per satellite over time with asymmetrically lower increases in cost to operators, effectively translating into a structural driver of downward pressure on capacity pricing. So the value proposition of those next generation HTS satellites has improved, as I mentioned earlier. However, continued progress really needs to happen in the cost base and pricing levels of the HTS to continue supporting the narrowing of the gap between satellite services and legacy terrestrial networks. Further drops in the cost base of capacity and associated end user pricing levels are expected with the entry of, as I said before, VHTS and NGSO constellations. And the improved economics enabled by this lower capacity pricing is expected to unlock new opportunities for broadband in rural and remote areas, but also increasingly for satellite in underconnected areas closer to cities and urban areas. To give you an example,